I'm going to share something that I learned. Thought I knew a pretty good bit about this story, but I didn't, like I thought I did. And what the kids say, I guess I was this week old. I get it all mixed up, whatever. When I discovered this, and I'll go you 6 ways to Sunday that you probably didn't know this either. I saw it in a whole different light. I've heard it preached about, talked about, spoke about, read about all my life. It also taught me a little bit more about how to take what Jesus was saying. He was on the way to Jerusalem. The multitudes were following him. Wasn't but a few chapters later that he entered triumphantly and died on the cross. But as he ministered across that countryside of Israel, it was hot and dry. Little old bitty country. I think you could put a bunch of them in Texas for sure. It's not about 9,000 square miles up against our 290 or 270,000 square miles. But this crowd was following him and had all kind of people in it. Some that he had healed and delivered and really was following him for who he was in Christ. There were some that just kind of wanted to know a little bit more about him. And there was a whole bunch of them that was waiting for him to slip up. The Pharisees and those that they could really chastise him for blasphemy. So Jesus had a tightrope to walk. Good thing he was who he was, or he might not have been able to make it. But to give it context, the story of the coin and the sower and the prodigal son. We read the story of the lost coin and we see what it means. We understand it, but it's told to a generation. I've probably got 3,000 pennies in a jar in there. I wouldn't miss one of them to speak of. Coins were hard to come by in that time. If I was to, I guess if my great-grandmother was able to come back for some reason and stroll through the house and come across an old note that I had written maybe one evening to Jordan, and it simply said, "Hey son, the internet's out, so no Netflix and chill tonight. Go ahead and use my card to order DoorDash for dinner. My cell phone charger isn't working right, so I'm going to run to Walmart and pick one up, and I'll be right back." That would be absolutely Greek to my great-grandmother, would it not? She'd probably pick up that I'm providing dinner some way through a DoorDash or something, and then I'm headed to town. That's about all she'd get out of it. Maybe she'd smile knowing that I'm providing dinner in some crazy way for my kiddo. So you have to put things in context for the people that are listening. You know, we see a picture of a little boy on a ride at Disney World with all smiles, and it's lovely. We like it. We might even comment on it. How cool is that? But then we read the story and we find out maybe that's his last trip. He's dying of leukemia and just wanted that one memory. Changes things, doesn't it? That's what this did for me on the prodigal son. Most of us know the story. The younger son decided he wanted to set out on his own and live the way he wanted to live. That's another thing. Prodigal doesn't mean that you went away. Prodigal, literally defined, is a spendthrift, someone that wastes money and just spends it on all kind of stuff, right? So I guess you could be a prodigal Christian, or sometimes in my life, prodigal farmer. But he left with the land that his dad had blessed him with. Land was hard to come by over there, y'all. Remember, they just marched through the desert generations before leaving Egypt. And, 290 miles long and about 85 miles wide. That ain't a whole lot of land for 2.5 million people. So a little parcel held value. His dad did it anyway, and we know how it went. He went off and sold it, spent all his money, ended up in the pig pen, and got to thinking, man, I'm just going to go back to my father's house and be a servant. That's all I want to be. Well, we take it as that, and we hear the father runs to him, and everything's great, made up, all is well. Beautiful story about forgiveness. But let me deepen it a little bit for you. As Jesus told this story, the ones that were listening, they understood what DoorDash meant in context. They understood what Walmart was and cell phone. They could have read that note because he was talking in their terms of the day. You see, there's a ritual that the Jewish people celebrated or didn't celebrate, actually had, that was called Kazaza. Look it up, Google it if you'd like. Google autocorrect it. It did for me when I looked it up. I always trust but verify when I hear things, and this is how it was. It was a ritual that happened in ancient times with the Israeli people, the Jews, when a son would take off with his inheritance and spend it all, and then would try to come back to acclimate back to the village after he had busted out. Well, what would happen in this ritual, the village elders would all gather at the city gate as the son was returning, or this person that had left the city had turned his back on them, and they would await his arrival along with throngs and crowds, because this was a spectacle to see someone groveling back after they had left with such fervor. And as the person approached, the city council, or elders if you would collaborate, talk, listen to the man's pitch, and decide whether or not they were going to banish him or accept him back. Now, the child's dad was never allowed at these. His mother was, because she would make the case for grace. But the dad wasn't, and there was a reason for that. But if they had means to have an inheritance, that meant that he was one of the wealthier of the bunch. And if he had attended that meeting, all he had to do was give his son his blessing, and the elders would have to disperse, and the son would be forgiven. So he wasn't allowed at the meeting. In the story we hear that the son was approaching the gate, and the father went running. At face value, it looks beautiful. But when you realize that the father broke all tradition and found another way out of the city in his robe as a prominent man full of etiquette, they weren't allowed to run. That was frowned upon. I guess in our old country terms, that was just not good sense. So here a dad was breaking every tradition at the risk of shame because he loved his son that much. And he knew that he must reach his son at a distance to bless him, to prevent his ultimate banishment at the city gates. It's pretty powerful stuff, y'all. I saw that note in a little different way. Made me look at a lot of things a lot different. Even Christ, just offering it up on that cross for us all. Right?